Top of the morning, everybody. How are y'all doing? Sorry, still congested from last night. We just had a lot of storms blow in, and that just gets all my allergies messed up. May cut this one short if this keeps up. Anyway, so howdy to everyone. Let's say howdy to everyone who's in the chat. Susan Robertson, Mr. D. Gene Hudson, Mary H. That's everyone who has spoken up. There's Chato. And that's everyone who's spoken up right now. So let's give everyone a few minutes to hop on. I hope y'all had a good... Wow, geez. Like I'm going through puberty with this stuff. Okay, let's try that one again. I hope y'all had a great time last night. I know I did. Interesting conversations, great questions. And it's one of those things we're going to, like I said, we're going to try and do a hangout every month at least. Just a lot to do, so that's it. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. I didn't go to bed until 1, and I kept getting woken up by different things. So it's going to be interesting to see how this day goes. But hi CJ, welcome back. I was trying to think if there was something I actually didn't get a chance to talk about last night. It's just an offhanded thing. I was watching a video, actually, and I saw one this morning that we'll talk about here in a second. I was watching a video yesterday, and it was a woman who was making the argument that Atlantis was in the middle of the Atlantic, and she brought up a bunch of different evidence I'd never even heard for there actually being a landmass that had been destroyed previously, and it was, some really compelling evidence. I'm actually at the moment leaning towards the theory that that Atlantis was actually in Africa, and that there's a whole thing on that. If you don't want to look at it, it's really, really fascinating. But she made a great and interesting point about there being evidence for there being a sort of like a large island that had once been in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a really interesting argument that she made. And so I was thinking about it, and the thing that caught me was when she goes back and she is reading from Plato's dialogue, right? Oh, hi, Batmom. So the thing that really caught my attention was when she was reading back the dialogues, she mentions that the Egyptian who's telling his great-great-grandfather, Plato's great-great-grandfather, the story, said, y'all have a new culture, so you only remember one catastrophe. I found that interesting. And so it got me thinking. I've long suspected that we have the cataclysm, and then we have a secondary cataclysm that occurs with the division of Peleg. That's often been my thought. In that what may have actually happened is we have is that in the same way that the conversation that we're having on Texas Channel is about how a lot of this phenomena, the paranormal phenomena, is actually being crammed into one box, and it's actually different phenomena. In the same way, I have long wondered if we're not, because we talk about how there's so many flood narratives around the world, and some look, very, very similar. Others are radically different. And the way they survive is by hiding on top of mountains and things like that. My question is this: is it possible there's actually two different sets of flood narratives? The first flood narrative, which is the destruction of the entire world that Noah survives with his family. Then there's a second set of catastrophes that occur with the breaking up of the land in the day of Peleg. That after everyone has dispersed from the Tower of Babel, they're going out, and God's like, all right, time to make certain you all stay apart, and the land masses are broken apart. Is it possible that is, when you have these other sets of stories of people surviving on mountains and all these other things, that's what's happening? That we're getting that second event, that second flood narrative. So that was my first thought. The other thought that I had is in the book of Jasher, which again, Book of Jasher is not the actual book that we have today. Is not what is referenced in the Bible. It just isn't. It is a medieval forgery from Spain. But what it is a collection of Jewish legends. So I find that interesting. So again, not scripture, and I ain't mentioned in scripture. This is a forgery, but it's a forgery of mythology, Jewish mythology. And the reason I can find it interesting is I find interesting parallels with other things. So that's when I'll use it. But it does talk about a time. At least I want to say that it's maybe it may even be I may be confusing it with the Book of Enoch, but I really do think it came out of Jasher. There is a king pre-flood who witnesses there's this destruction of a major city by a flood, like the river that runs around it. Hey, Joey Hayes. Floods and destroys the civilization. And this king, who is supposed to be wise, who lives centuries before the flood, he looks and he goes, God's going to judge this world, and he's going to do it with a flood. I better build something to bury into the earth to preserve our knowledge, because God's going to allow someone to survive. So that's this event that occurs, and it also occurs to me. It's like, well, what if that's Atlantis? What if Atlantis was the pre-flood? Was a pre-flood civilization that was destroyed in this, sort of pre-Noahic flood deluge event, and that's the story that the Egyptians remember, because it's pre-flood, and their civilization, their civilization was started by a Nephilim giant, and so he had that knowledge, and so secondary thought on that one. Just as it's like, what if there's again two flood events, Noah, and then a later one that people are recalling, but the other one is, what if Atlantis is pre-flood, and that event that's recorded in Jasher is the same as the sinking of Atlantis? I got no way of knowing either way. I don't have any way of proving it either way. Just a thought that was in my head. Thought y'all would like to hear it. Yeah. Titan's back. Okay. Changing your name midstream is you're just messing with me now. All right, I'll let it slide this once. So anyway, that, like I said, that was just sort of percolating in my brain. I got no way of knowing it one way or the other, proving it one way or the other. Just interesting thought. But the other thing that I found that was really interesting was there's several people who are running around claiming that the boat that, hey Daniela, Ron Wyatt found is actually a Nephilim ark and not Noah's ark. And I kind of have to call their entire argument into question, because they use Zechariah Sitchin as in his writing in the Book of Enki as the argument for it. Oh yeah. Well, the like button, I don't care about on this channel. I'm not really looking to make it much larger. I like the fact that it's small. But if y'all wouldn't like it, if y'all want to hit like, that's cool. So the entire argument for this idea that there was a second ark with Nephilim is based on the works of Zechariah Sitchin. And as I've mentioned here, Sitchin, honestly, there's good questions to whether or not he could even read cuneiform. There are plenty of scholars. Heiser's one of them, who's like, look, this dude's making it up. Like, well, in Samaria, that's the thing, is there is no account of there being a Nephilim ark. This argument is coming from Zechariah Sitchin's work, and the problem is Sitchin made everything up. I mean, straight up. If he could read cuneiform, and there are scholars who are calling that into question, even if he could, nothing that he writes about is found in any text. So essentially, he's, particularly his Book of Enki, he's like, oh, this is a lost book. From where? Like, where is it? No one can find it. they've, in fact, a lot of the stuff that he writes about, you can't even find like the Anunnaki and Nibiru on the same text. Like, it's just nowhere to be found. So this argument that there was a second ark is basically based on Sitchin's work. So I'm discrediting the whole thought. Plus, it just runs counter to what we see in the Bible, where it says specifically, all that had the breath of life in their nostrils died, which which I'm convinced more than ever is just talking about humans, because it's a repetition of thought that is far too it's brought, the way it's brought up in the text makes me think that they are trying to tell us it's human life that is definitely the target of this thing. And even though the Nephilim are not truly humans, they are accounted as humans. And so, yeah, Mystery Knuckle goes to another point that I was going to make. So, like I said, it runs contrary to the scripture. And again, and the problem is, if you're using Sitchin as a basis for your work, I'm going to call BS, because I'm sorry, Sitchin he's not reliable. Like I said, at best, even if he could read cuneiform, he just made up everything that he wrote. There's nothing in any scholarship that shows anything he's talking about is valid. And here's the worst part. He never, like, people have said he's at best a terrible scholar, because he never shows where he gets any information from. Like, he's never actually references the tablets that he's supposed to be translating, ever. So what we have is that he's translating tablets that have never been seen by anyone. Bye, Danielle. Have fun. It's like he's either translating tablets that no one has ever seen, has never been found by anybody, or he's just making it up. And there's a lot of, and so I go back to, he's making it up. There's a lot of really good evidence from scholars that he just doesn't know what he's talking about at all. Back to Ron Wyatt, I don't know that the ark he found, let me phrase this. There is an interesting shape that has a lot to speak for it. I don't know that it's Noah's Ark. I tend to think that it may even be a boat that is found, but I don't know that it's necessarily Noah. I tend to agree with Mr. D Knuckle that Noah would have used, and the people who came with him, they would have used the ark as they would have broken it down to use it to make homes, to make tools, to make whatever they needed. So I don't think the ark would have survived more than 2 centuries, not because of decay, but because of people just repurposing the materials needed to restart civilization. So I tend to think that happened, and that's the case. But again, it does look like there's a boat that's on Mount Ararat, so I'm not going to say that it's not it. I'm iffy. I want more evidence. Again, just me being me. Hold on, and I saw one more thing. So anyway, those are just 2 things that popped up, and I thought y'all would like to hear. So yeah, okay. So okay. Was it Titan? Yeah, Titan asked, how would you know about Nibiru? So Nibiru does come from the Sumerian records and the cuneiform writings. So Nibiru is a thing. It just means place of crossing. The Anunnaki are a thing. The problem is they're never in the same text. There's never any argument that Nibiru is a place or planet. There's never an argument that the Anunnaki come from Nibiru. Like, they're never even on the same text. So what it looks like he did, honestly, is what I think Joseph Smith did. He took the Bible, he took a bunch of translated writings from the and ideas and thoughts from the cuneiform writings that he had access to, and just made up a story. I mean, just straight up, and he just copied and pasted and made this stuff up. That's very much what we see with the Book of Mormon. Honestly, a lot of linguists have gone back and said it looks like he just read a King James version of the Bible and just started lifting stuff and just sort of reshuffling stories to create it. I think that's what Sitchin was doing. There's no good evidence that he could even read cuneiform. Back to CJ, hearing a lot about the Akashic records lately. Yes, you are probably going to. That's probably going to be something that's going to pop up now more because it's really a fan. The people who are a fan of it are coming out of the UFO area. In fact, this is a conversation I had with a friend of mine. Is if you're watching Ancient Aliens, like if you've noticed, like everything for like the last 3 or 4 or 5 seasons has been far more into New Age mysticism than what used to be. And the reason for that is the UFO movement today is much more about a it's a Trojan horse for the New Age movement. That's all it is. In fact, what is his name? I'm gonna need a lot of caffeine today. I cannot remember his name. We may even talk about this today. My mind running on so much sleep is just everywhere. He's a Christian now, and he's a good kid, but he was very much into the New Age. I cannot remember his name to save my life. Was let me see if I can find him real quick. Because he came out of the New Age. If I can find his name, well, I think Michael Heiser interviewed him on his thing. New Age. Stephen Bancars, that's his name. Yeah, Stephen Bancars. Sorry, when my brain gets on one of those things, I can't escape it. So Stephen Bancars. He is a so he actually fell into the New Age and became sort of this New Age guru because of Ancient Aliens. Like that's how long that show's been around now, and showing me I'm getting old. The show's been around long enough for people for like the first from like season 1 or season 2. They get exposed to it, they get into the New Age, then they come out of it and become Christians. That's how long this thing's been around. And he was making a lot of cash as a New Age guy. But the UFO movement has always been about, in my argument, well, a couple of things. And one of the things is about sort of a reintroduction of the New Age and creating what I would argue C.S. Lewis called the materialist witch. Okay. The materialist witch is in C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters. He talks about the idea that you could have a witch so he makes the argument that a materialist is not fun because you can't play with them, because you can't change the worldview. You can't if you introduce spirituality into a materialist worldview, they're going to go immediately to God. They're going to be like, well, does that mean that there's a God? And then you've got a chance then the demon has a chance of losing that soul. So you can't upset an apple cart. But with a witch, you absolutely can play with them. You can torment them, do whatever you want to do with them. But the problem with a witch is they're more likely to think about God. Even if they're sort of on this other side, it's easier to lose a witch because at some point they're going to go that direction, and then you can lose them. So I think it's Wormwood theorizes in the book, which is C.S. Lewis talking, that they could create a materialist witch, which is someone who can believe in things supernatural without believing in things supernatural. That it's all somehow chalked up to a materialist worldview, but you could actually have supernatural phenomena in it. I have argued that that's what the UFO movement is. It is a way to create a materialist witch, because it's not that they have supernatural abilities or that they're supernatural creatures. It's only that they come from another dimension. They have power, so they have higher powers. They just have more technology that looks like magic to us. I mean, how often do we see in movies the ancient astronaut theory being played out? I mean, almost every major franchise has it now. The Men in Black, heck, DC, the DC movies, the Marvel movies, all revel in ancient astronaut theory. So it's an introduction into this material witchcraft, which also allows for things like the Akashic records. Um, yeah, Screwtape Letters is a real good book. So is Mere Christianity. They're both very, very good. And so where this is sort of where the Akashic or the Akashic, I can't remember how it's pronounced, records fall into place. So it is sort of this like universal knowledge is the best way to think of it. It is a real thing that is out there, but it's knowledge that can be obtained if you have certain if you reach certain points with your spiritual growth, you have certain mental abilities. You can reach out and you can grab it and get information. In fact, their argument is that all the geniuses of the world that humanity has had, like Da Vinci and Einstein, that what they were really doing is actually accessing the Akashic records. And it's a record of everything that's ever happened, ever existed. And when you have this big revelation out of nowhere, it's not your brain coming to anything. It's not Holy Spirit bringing something to you. It's you've tapped into the Akashic records. And that's the idea behind them. So it's this new age, it's a very new age idea that's been adopted by the UFO community, because they're ultimately going to come to, as much as I would have said 10 years ago, that, well, it's 2021. I would have said as recently as 4 years ago that the Antichrist, when he comes, his religion is going to be ancient astronaut theory, and I agree with that still. But I thought they were going to use actual UFOs. They're going to be walking around in flesh suits, these little gray men, the whole 9 yards. I'm actually kind of willing to. I'm now suspect of that. I don't think it's going to be that. Well, not necessarily that obvious. It will be obvious, but it will be. I don't think they're going to end up being that. I think they're going to be much more supernatural than we realize. Like they may just be. Yes, we're like you would look at them and be like, you're clearly an angel, or you're clearly a supernatural being. You're not just using technology. You're not something that evolved on Klaatu 9 and is showing up here, right? So I think that's sort of where we're in, is this transition from aliens being dudes hopping on Enterprise, on like their version of the Enterprise or a Warbird, and warping over here, to it being more of a, they're from another dimension, they're from another timeline. They are higher energy beings, things like that. And the Akashic records is part of this whole thing of materializing the supernatural. At this point in time, we're not even on topic anymore. I don't know what the topic is. CJ, this is played in the collective unconscious. Yes and no. So yeah, it's similar in that there is a sort of universal thing, but so it does kind of tie together, but it's a separate thing altogether. Whereas the collective unconscious is the culmination of all of humanity. It's more of the Akashic records is like the entire universe, all the alien life forms that exist, that have ever existed. I think some will even argue will exist in the future. It's all in the Akashic records, and you can just access it. I would actually argue that the collective unconscious is a real thing, but it's not what we think it is. It's not our collective unconscious. It's actually the influence of the supernatural spirits that are over every nation. That's why whole groups of people just seem to go nuts all at once. If you really look in the histories, there's a lot that's being built to get to that point. However, I would argue that there's, again, the Deuteronomy 32, the spirits that are over each nation. I think that may be more what we're talking about when we think about the collective unconscious. It's these spirits that are active, and they are getting what they want. Just a personal thought. Titan says, it's interesting that Nibiru means place of crossing. Gary Wayne suspects that the Nephilim passed through portals to escape the flood. You know what? I've heard that theory by Gary Wayne. I'm not going to say that he's wrong. I just don't know that I agree with it. I do think the Nephilim pre-flood died. Like they're all gone. And they weren't necessarily killed in the flood. If you read the book of Enoch, they murdered each other. That was their punishment, right? It was really more the punishment. They had to die, but the way they died was that God used, I think it was Uriel, to send a delusion, and so the giants fought amongst each other and murdered each other in this sort of civil war. The Greeks would count this as the gigantomachy. They kill each other, and Michael holds all of these 200 watchers in chains to watch this happen because they love their children. Like that's something we tend to forget, is they absolutely love their kids, which is probably why they were willing to let them get away with what they did. They're like, they had, okay, I just saw something, not physically. My brain made the connection. So one of the punishments of the watchers was to watch their children murder each other. In fact, it is so harsh that Michael himself in the book of Enoch says this is such a great punishment, that not great meaning yay, great meaning profound. This is such a severe punishment, such a profound thing that he's done here. Yeah, I see that. That no one would ever do what they did again. Michael was like, whoa. Like the angels would say, they were like, okay, that was harsh, but you got your point across, God. And then he locks them in chains in Tartarus, right? So the Nephilim are dead. They become demons. So the flood is trying to get rid of their knowledge and the influence they've made on humanity. And maybe there were other things out there. Maybe it wasn't just, again, there's the question, were there monsters that were the, angel animal hybrids or Nephilim animal hybrid? I don't know. I'm iffy on all of it. I am. I just am. We'll leave it there. We'll just leave it right there. But the reason they were punished was that the watchers allowed their children to do these things, to become cannibals, to oppress humanity, and that's why they were killed. And this is the thing that just connected in my brain. Isn't that what we see today in our society? It's like there was this cop who was murdered by these two. I mean, I say kids, they look like they're older teenagers or adults. I haven't looked too much at the story, but their mother came out and said, oh, they're wonderful kids. They don't, I'm sorry they did this. I don't know why they did this. And it's like, well, it's because you were a bad mom. I'm sorry. These kids became murderers. Like they're gangbangers. Like you didn't do your job. What I have always seen, and this is just me in my life. Now, again, trust me, I have seen good kids from really good families that did everything right, and the kids go astray. I really have. Trust me. However, even in those families where that's happened, there did seem to be a level of permissiveness. I love my kid, therefore nothing my kid ever does is wrong. And that is what I've seen, though, in these people who go off and they become these things, these monsters who murder other people for money or just joy, whatever. They tend to come out of these very permissive families where it's, well, I love my child. My little baby can't do anything wrong. I will let him get away with everything. And they're swearing at their, like, have you ever seen these kids? They're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And they're like, I hate you, Mom. You're an idiot. And they start swearing at their mother. It's like, I have seen kids in, like, and of course it's always going to be Walmart, and they're doing this and they're yelling at their mom. And I'm like, lady, I don't want to beat your kid for you. Like, what the heck? What is going on in your home that you would allow that? It's a permissiveness. And it's these watchers love their kids so much, they allow them to be so evil. They were like, be evil. You corrupt humanity. eat people. It doesn't matter to us because we love you so much. Just we're seeing the same thing. And maybe someone now there was a comment in the video on there being a Nephilim arc, which again is just bad. It's just bad scholarship, and I don't mean to come down on them. It's a bad, again, for all the reasons we've already talked about. I just don't think it's good scholarship. But they made there is a line that does exist in Gilgamesh and in that Sitchin stole. It talks about how the Anunnaki did want to save, or the Apkallu, I think, wanted to save civilized society. And that's an interesting concept. And one of the things they pointed out was that's colonialism, and colonialism is always evil because it's about oppressing other humans, and that it's a Nephilim thought. I find it an interesting argument, but I think the bigger point here is the Nephilim corrupted all of our history. They have is both them, what they taught humanity, and as demons, they've corrupted us. And so it's things like this overly permissive family structure, it's like their corruption of humanity has continued unabated, and every time we see their practices coming to the forefront, the acceptance of magic, acceptance of human sacrifice in one way or another, looking at you, abortion, these things bring about this, I would argue maybe it's Nephilim behavior, to be more violent, to be selfish, to like, these are Nephilim behaviors. These are what they're trying to make us be. And it is, as a society goes towards certain things and accepts sort of the Trojan horse behaviors that the Nephilim spirits want us to accept, we accept parts of their personality. Just a thought. And it bears itself out as different ways. So I guess we're just going to make this a hangout. We're 33 minutes in. I think we're just going to do another hangout this morning. I'm still run down from last night. CJ responded, saying the idea of spirits ruling over nations brings a new perspective to not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places. CJ, so yes, thank you. That is, I've told this story a bunch, and I know you're newer to the channel, right? So you probably have missed some of the videos we've done on Deuteronomy 32, but I like telling the story because I think it's a great point to sort of tell us where we are as a society. Is the church system, right? Gentleman I had known pretty much my entire life, if not most of my life, one way or another. Father of a friend of mine. We were talking one time 2-3 years ago now, and maybe it's only a year and a half. I don't know. Since 2020, I don't know where we are anymore. Anyway, and he basically said, "Hey, Jason, I got a question for you." I'm like, yeah. He goes, this Deuteronomy 32 stuff. It wasn't even Deuteronomy 32. He didn't even know about it. He had just been reading through Paul's letter. He goes, when Paul writes about warring against spirits in heavenly places, he goes, do you think he meant that as a real thing? Like that's really what's happening? And I looked at him. I'm like, yeah, of course it is. You go to a Bible church. How do you not? Why would you not think that it's real? And he's like, well, I've always heard it as more of a metaphor or something like that. And that's when I just stopped. And I had to explain the whole Deuteronomy 32 thing, which I'll go into full detail here in a second. But it occurs to me that, now let me do that now. So Deuteronomy 32 is such an important verse because it has been mistranslated or it's not really mistranslated in the Bible, because most Bibles that we have today use the Masoretic text, and it's a correct translation. So in Deuteronomy 32, let me pull it up and read it, because it's been a while since I've read it. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy 33. Which one is it? I always forget where it is in Deuteronomy 32. Here it is. There he goes. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of all generations. Ask your father, and he will inform you, your elders, that they will tell you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. Okay. So let's stop right there. Israel is in the Masoretic text, right? But that is not what's in the Septuagint, and it's not what's in the older versions that we're finding in like the Dead Sea Scrolls. Rather, because let's stop and think about it. What is this talking about? This is talking about Babel. This is the Tower of Babel when he separates humanity, right, into the table of 70 nations that we've dealt with earlier on Thursdays, right? The 70 nations. That's why whenever you see this, the number 70, and in the Bible, it's actually a call out to these 70 spirits or these 70 nations. It's an indication that God did not abandon humanity, but is rather going to reclaim them as an inheritance. But in the older text, it doesn't say Israel, it says sons of God or angels. So what is really being said in Deuteronomy 32 is that at the Tower of Babel, God divorces humanity and he set spirits upon them. And these spirits actually rule the nations. These are when you see in Daniel, it talks about the princes of, like the prince of Persia. And we see Michael, who's the prince over Israel. That's where this is all coming from. It's this idea that when God divorces humanity, which is why he creates Israel, right? This is why, and Israel, and again, this is where I think the Masoretic text gets it. Israel is called as a son of God because of Isaac, because God causes Isaac to come into being. Even though he is a son of Abraham, God superintends that birth, a birth that's supposed to be impossible. It is still Abraham's child, but God created it, and so he creates a nation out of that child. That's how Israel is used sometimes as a son of God in the Old Testament writings. I think that's where that comes in. Somebody somewhere was like, okay, son of God in this case just means Israel. I'll write Israel. So it was a theological thing they were doing when they wrote that, and that's what made it into the modern Masoretic text. The older text says sons of God. And that makes more sense because think about it, Israel wouldn't exist for centuries after the Tower of Babel event. So what's happening is God divorces humanity. He sets the sons of God over humanity to watch over them, be literally as gods. This is why in Psalm 82, let's see if I can find it. I probably can't because I can never find anything in this Bible, and I keep forgetting to switch it out. Here we are. Psalm 82. Here's the thing I really like about this Bible is that the paper is thin, but it's not too thin like my other Bibles are. I think Psalm 82. Yeah. So Psalm 82, right? God takes his stand in his own congregation. Well, again, a better translation of that is actually the divine council, right? He's taking his place in the divine council. He goes, he judges in the midst of the rulers. These are the sons of God. How long will you judge unjustly? And show partiality to the wicked? Vindicate the weak and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do, so he's calling out the spirits that are over these nations. He's like, y'all are doing this stuff bad. You're like, I gave you humanity to take care of. These, how long are you going to do these bad things? These are the things you're supposed to be doing. It says, they do not know nor understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, and this is God speaking, you are gods, and all of you are the sons of the Most High. Nevertheless, you will die like men and fall like any one of the princes, meaning the princes of the earth. And this is the prophet. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for it is thou who dost possess all the nations. This idea of Jesus inheriting the nations comes because all those spirits are thrown down and they go to hell, which is death. That's how Jesus inherits the nations. That's the idea. Is he's reclaiming them, but the reason they're dying is because they went astray. They all, instead of worshiping God and causing, it's like they are supposed to be the gods over the nations, yes, but they were to keep justice. They were to treat humanity well. They were to draw worship to the Most High God. Melchizedek in Genesis, which we are just so far away from, but we'll get there. But Melchizedek, if we look at the God that he was supposedly worshiping and he was prince over, a lot of people looked at his name and said, he's this king priest, but it's to the king of righteousness. The God that they worship was the God of righteousness, which is Yahweh or Jehovah. He wasn't Jewish. He was part of the Noahic covenant, which is, again, all of humanity. That's why they point to Melchizedek, right? It's like he's not pointing to the stuff that was meant for the Jews. He's pointing to a broader universal priesthood, this older order that is supposed to take care of the entire world, all of humanity, not just the Jewish people. So there's this idea that's out there that these spirits are actually over the nations. That's why you have what you have. This is why Paul even says that our fight isn't with the humans, it's with the spirits over them. That there's not just the spirit, like some chief prince over the nation. That chief prince has subordinate spirits, and they've all gone astray. That's who we're fighting. And the thing is, the fact that the church, the modern day American church system, will not address this at all, will not treat it as real, I would argue is one of the reasons we are where we are, both politically and spiritually in this nation. This is a big deal. And the thing is, the church system has completely ignored this stuff in this teaching that is understanding why things are the way they are, why our world is the way it is. This is all important stuff, and we just don't even talk about it. So, CJ, yes. It's like once you realize what these spirits are that are over this, it changes, again, it changes the nuances of everything. In fact, I'll give you one more. And I don't know if you've heard me talk about this, so I'll talk about it again anyway. It's my microphone. Kneeling. We only kneel to God. You stand for a thing, right? Whatever your idea is, you stand for an idea. You kneel to a God or to a king or to someone of power. Who are they kneeling to during the national anthem? And please keep in mind when I say this, what have we talked about? The national anthem is an act of secular worship. That's why it was designed. In fact, it's also one of the reasons our founding fathers didn't have a Pledge of Allegiance. They didn't have a national anthem. They actually avoided that stuff. All of this came about in the 20th century. A lot of it came about under Woodrow Wilson. If you know your history, you know how evil Woodrow Wilson was. So any sociologist will tell you these things where we come and we pledge allegiance and we sing the national, it's called secular worship. The Statue of Liberty it's not just a statue that's erected, it is designed as worship. That's what these things are. It's a secular idea of worship, but it is that. So what's happening when you kneel during the national anthem? You're submitting yourself to the spirit that is over the United States. And we may say, but didn't we consecrate the nation to God? Well, we did. But remember, God isn't just, that's our behavior. God doesn't own the nations yet. That happens upon Jesus' return. Until then, we are still under spirits, and there are different spirits for every nation. I would argue the spirit we're under is Columbia. That's the spirit of liberty. Well, what happens when liberty becomes unmoored by Christian morals, unmoored by our individual worship to God and our desire to retain, to walk in his ways? It becomes licentiousness. That's what we're seeing in our nation. It's licentiousness. We've turned away from morality. We've turned away from personal responsibility, because liberty in an evil sense is to throw away your own responsibilities. That's the spirit we're under, and I think that's what we're seeing today. Remember, God doesn't own the nations yet. That's happening. We're in the process of it, but not yet. It's coming though, and that's why we look forward to Jesus' return, because he comes, he throws down the nations, he throws down their spirits. And this, in fact, this is why, like, have you ever wondered why Paul says things like, don't you know that we're going to judge the angels? Don't you know that we're going to be kings and priests? That will judge the nations? Where is that coming from? It's the idea that in fact, this is a great contrast. A lot of people have argued that the Nephilim couldn't be hybrids of humans and angels, because humans and angels can't have kids because of what Jesus says, and Jesus calls us sons of God in the New Testament. Therefore, the sons of God in the Old Testament must also be humans. That's a complete misreading of the entire Bible. But more importantly, the thing that we miss most often, myself included, is that all the language that's used for angels, and specifically the spirits over nations, in the Old Testament is used as believers in the New Testament. We are becoming those things. We become the sons of God. Because we are now inherited through. We're an inheritance through Jesus. That's where Paul's getting all of it, all of his theology. He's like, hey, Jesus switches up the language. He's telling us what we are going to become, what our ultimate destiny is. That's where this is all coming from. That's why the stuff that's always used as angels in the Old Testament becomes humans in the New Testament. He's telling us these things. He's saying where our ultimate destiny lies. So I don't know if any of that meant anything to anybody. I just hope that makes sense. Titan was telling his sister about the nuisances of the past week. She replied, "You caught the thief. Oh, you caught the thief claim, Proverbs 6:32. If a thief is caught, he must pay sevenfold." Don't know if that applies, but I like it. Okay. So, Titan, something you want to tell us? Just saying. But yeah, so long story short on all of this is that we are, as humans, we live under these spirits. And that's why this whole kingdom series that we're doing is, I think, important. It is making us understand that we are leaving a real legitimate kingdom with these supernatural princes. And what we're doing is we are going to the new kingdom, which is Jesus. We are putting ourselves under Jesus. We are immigrating, in one sense, from one nation to another. And it is going to be the invading nation. This is when it talks about kingdoms and nation. That's not a metaphor. It's real. It's just we don't see it that way because it's supernatural. We have to return to a supernatural mindset. We've become too scientifically, not even scientifically driven, too materialistically driven in mindset. That's our problem. And so we don't see what God is really doing. We don't see how he's moving. We often don't realize the influence of the supernatural. I'll end on this story. My wife, who up until very recently was not really political. I was raised on Rush Limbaugh. I can't not be political, but she really wasn't. Like, she was she was conservative, whole 9 years, but she just wasn't into it. Again, I won't say who it is, but I think y'all know. She started getting into it. She started watching the news, and all of a sudden she stopped, and a newly elected congresswoman was talking, and she just paused it, and she looked at me. She was, Jason? I'm like, yeah. What's up with that? I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, she's, congresswoman out of New York. What? He goes, no. Look at her eyes. This woman is crazy. And I'm like, well, yeah, I think I've gotten used to it. But I'm like, she's got crazy. She goes, no, this woman's nuts. And then we see and it's like these other keep coming. She goes, what is going on? Why do all these people have like just straight up crazy eyes? Like, what is going on? These people look insane. And I kind of noticed, I'm like, well, it's because a lot of these people are under spirits. Those spirits have been driven insane, because I don't care what you think about Trump one way or the other, it's irrelevant. What he did was disrupt a plan. I've always said since day one, he was a disruption. He was a bull in a china shop, and that was his role. He was disrupting something, a much larger plan that we're seeing play out right now. All he did was buy us some time, but we're in that plan now. This is where the stuff that's happening now would have happened 4 years ago or 5 years ago now, had he not been elected. But that's why people just went absolutely nuts, was because the plan of the princes they were under got disrupted. Because of that, the spirits went nuts, and these people, because they're so tied into it, they went nuts. I go back to the Matrix, and CJ, I hope you're old enough to have seen the Matrix. I'm finding, unfortunately, because it's 2021, I'm finding kids that I'm like, it's like the Matrix. They're like, what movie are you talking about? Doesn't make me feel good. But if you haven't seen the original Matrix, go watch the original Matrix. The other two you can watch if you want. I like them, but whatever. But the first Matrix sets up this idea that everyone's living in this artificial reality, and that you can be, and if you're still plugged into the system, then these programs called agents can take over your body, and boom, you just become an agent. And if they see through you, anything a human sees or observes that's plugged into the Matrix, they see and observe. That's the real world that's the real world we live in. I didn't want to spoil it for you, because it really is one of the best movies of the last 30 years. The first one, anyway. It's probably the best metaphor for the reality we actually live in. Every human you see who's not saved, they're still plugged in. They haven't been red-pilled into Christ, not politically. They're part of that system. They are part of the prince of the nations. They're plugged into it. They are susceptible to demons, more so than we are. They are. Well, Mary H., you should see it. It was, they're still plugged in. So when the spirits go crazy, they go crazy. Germany, I mean, look at what happened there. And I probably need to redo that video. It occurred to me I need to do it for Siru, because I talked about the Pergamum altar, right? How that got moved to Germany, and just completely, and like that's when everything goes off the rails for them. I should probably redo that and put that on Siru, so it'll be easier to find. But yeah, I mean, when the spirits go crazy, the humans under them go crazy. That's why as Christians we can look around and say, what is going on? What is happening? Now, it's not only Christians that can do that. There are people who, they just have to love the truth enough to see it. But those who are sold out to the system, those who are sold out to these demons, to these sons of God, they don't see it, because they don't like the truth. And so they avoid it. They do whatever the system tells them. They're plugged in. They're manipulated by these spirits and by these systems, which goes back to the entire point. Paul, our war is not against them. It's not really against the politicians. It's not against the people who are burning things down and the people with the googly eyes. It's against the spirits that are over them. That's why we have to pray. That's why we do need to end abortion in this nation, because that's giving them power. We have to fight them on a spiritual level. The problem is we've been trying to fight them as a political thing. The church has been over more than a century ago. The church went underneath politics. We're supposed to be over here. We're not supposed to be Republican or Democrat. We're supposed to be above them, saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! This is what's good, and this is what's bad, and we need to call a spade, and a strike a strike." I'm mixing metaphors here, but that's what we're supposed to be doing, and we haven't been. What have we been doing? We've been arguing on behalf of political parties. We've been on both sides. We've been playing politics, not realizing that the problem is when you play politics, you don't get anything done. That's why it became a game. So we think we're doing something. In the same way that you think that you are okay, I just saw that. It's sorry, that threw me off a little bit. I mentioned this before. As the Western church system lost the belief in the supernatural, we just do. We don't see it. That's why we play the game of politics. That's why we wait for the Republicans or the Democrats to do something. We don't separate ourselves and go over here and say, no, no, no. We don't care who you vote for, per se. We don't care what moniker you use, per se. We want you to do the right thing. And this is what the good and godly thing is. And if you do this, we'll give you support. And we will praise you, and we'll reward, and we'll praise you for it. You do the wrong thing, we're going to come after you. That's how we should be. But we don't. We just we rejected the supernatural. We rejected our role. We abdicated our role as salt and light, and just went underneath the politics. And that's why the church is broken up. That's why we're useless. That's why we have become so weak. Our war is up here. It's supernatural. We don't believe it anymore, so we focus on the material. We abdicated the entire fight to spirits that don't have our best interest in mind. So, just saying. There's a show a while back, and my dad mentioned Ellen. Okay. CJ, if you can email me about that dream, I would appreciate that. Titan, that will do it. Yeah. So Titan, you think everything traces back to when you helped? Yeah. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Satan doesn't like it when we take steps towards doing things. We'll leave it there. You know what? I think you're probably right. I wasn't sure who was at the time, but in the dream, he was. So CJ, that actually might. And it's. Thank you for telling me that dream. Let me just say thank you. Thank you for telling me that dream. That's. I'm going to take that into consideration. So we will, let's see, we've come to the end of the hour. We didn't really talk about what we were going to talk about today, and I apologize for that, but I think we had a good time. My brain was fried from just not getting any sleep anyway. So thank you, CJ. Yes, please email me and give me all the details that you can. That would be great. I would really appreciate that. And on that note, I will see y'all tonight on Daniela's show. I think she's got something interesting planned for us. So we'll go from there. We will definitely see y'all on Monday on Texas' show. And then, of course, Thursday, hopefully everything will be back to normal. So we'll have fun. So y'all have a good one. I will catch y'all on the flip side. And y'all just enjoy the rest of your day. Be good.